Yeah, hi and welcome everybody. Today we have a special guest, Willy Legrand. Hi, joining from Bonn.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thanks very much, Philip, for having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. Just a quick introduction. Me and Willy, we're actually colleagues at the International University. That's how we also were connected, brought together by another friend of us. He's also deeply involved into sustainable tourism. So this is how we met, and this is why I wanted you to meet Willy too, because he's really deeply involved in sustainable tourism, has long years of experience. He's teaching it at universities. He's also on the board of experts for the ITB Tourism Fair in Berlin. And when I look at his LinkedIn, he's all over the place talking about hospitality and sustainability. So I have the great honor to talk with you. And yeah, just a quick introduction maybe from yourself. How did you come to sustainable hospitality or sustainable tourism?
Yeah, well, I've been doing research in that field now for I think over 2 decades, but the question is, where did I come from? So, I come from France originally. I was born in the mountains, in the Jura Mountains, which are mountains close to Switzerland. But my parents immigrated to Canada in the 1970s, and I followed them, and I spent 10 years on the east coast of Canada in the province of Quebec. For those people that would know, it's a French-speaking province. And there I grew up on a farm. My parents were farmers. And perhaps that's really the first step into sort of that understanding of the value of our environment, really, because, the careful handling of nature, the use of resources. When you think about water, you think about soil, and nature itself, the monitoring of the weather as a farmer, the weather conditions during planting, during harvesting season. I mean, all of that is super important. That's basically part of my everyday family life for years growing up. So anyways, that led me to study geography. Actually, I studied what was called humanities back then. So it's humanities, but majoring in geography in Manitoba, in central Canada. And then I moved to the Canadian West Coast, where I started to work in the hospitality industry on the Vancouver Island. But I always wanted to, bridge this. I wanted to bridge what I knew about environment and geography and hospitality. I did an MBA with a specialization in corporate environmental management. I went on to do my PhD. And through all these studies of environmental initiative, the goal was, how can we do a better hospitality industry, a better tourism industry? And that's basically what it came down. So it's a bit of a personal story. It's also a passion for nature, for natural environment, I guess. And a wonderful industry, which is a welcoming industry, the hospitality industry. So, we like pristine environment. We like things to be good. We like tasteful. We like food. We like all the products from nature. So it sort of makes sense to bridge those two things, in fact.
Actually, saving yourself, no? If you want to save the tourism industry, you need to save the environment, because if you don't, then there's no more value, like you say, a little bit to visit,
Yeah,
no?
that's it. That yourself as well. Okay, the hospitality and tourism sector, we depend so much on ecosystem services. We monetize. I keep saying that we monetize nature very well. We have beaches where people come. We have forests. People go, and we have mountains. All of that are available playgrounds for our guests, and we monetize this. So the question is, what do we get back? What do we give back to the natural environment? And you're right. We depend on that so much, but we depend as well for our services, as you said, food, beverage, construction material for my restaurant and my hotel. We need wood and things like that. So it's super important, right? I mean, it's not only us. It's like the global GDP relies, half of the global GDP relies on ecosystem services, what nature does for free for us. So it's the same for our industry.
You're right. I have then maybe a little bit question for everybody to understand the impact of the tourism on the environment. You studied in depth, you're saying. Just for us to get an idea, okay, obviously traveling to a destination is an impact, but what other impacts do we have on site, or maybe moving around on site? Maybe you can describe a little bit where the tourism industry has an impact, and then maybe we find the solutions for that.
Yeah. I mean, the impacts are, we can think, even if we just take a hotel itself, we often think that the impacts are when the travelers check in, and this is where the impacts are starting, because the travelers are using the services. We're using water in a room, and then we're using equipment in the kitchen. We're using gas, and we need to heat up the meals, and electricity. So this is all operational impacts, and there's a lot. In tourism we have a lot of operational impact, but I'm actually quite interested in everything that has led to having those operational impact, which is the way we design, develop, construct all these infrastructure, right? I mean, everything that goes around providing a nice stay means you have developed roads, you have developed airports, you have moved land, you've built properties. And so that's the sum of those impact. And we often talk about the embodied carbon. If we talk about carbon, for example, of the material that you use in building, in building a hotel, for example. And if we look at that, so more of a life cycle assessment of the impacts, I mean, this is quite huge, right? I mean, the operational impact of doing the food and beverage every day, of making sure the lights are on, making sure this is also substantial. And this is what we've been focusing a lot, trying to minimize those impact, really. But for me, there's a greater part which comes from the way we actually build and maintain our infrastructure. And if we can take a hotel per se, we say, we have the building itself, the construction of it, the painting, the roofing, the way we're going to put, what equipment we're going to put in there. And then there is going to be the regular refurbishment cycle over the years of this building, which are quite heavy in the hospitality sector. When we think about tech upgrade, for example, in our rooms, right? New flat screen TVs and put iPads and whatever, that's so regular. And then you have the refurbishment. So all of that means waste stream, means embodied energy, embodied carbon. And over the lifetime of the building, I mean, we don't have fixed data, but if we just take that one measure of carbon over the lifetime of a building, everything that I've talked about constructing, refurbishing regularly, take a lifetime of a building, that might be anywhere between 30 to 70% of the carbon emitted is not from operating the light and the heating, cooling. It's actually from doing all of what I've said. So renovating, refurbishing, upgrading, deconstructing, constructing, right? This is huge. And that's only for carbon. We're not talking about solid waste, water waste, and so on. So this is what's interesting in this industry. This is why there's so much potential to do better, really, looking at alternative material, etc. So that's the part where the customers don't have much of a, right? They don't have so much of an effect, because the customers themselves, when you travel, you have an operational impact, right? At the property, what is being offered to you, and your own behavior at the property. These are operational impact. And I mean, there's a long series of them, but perhaps the greater impact is actually where the guests cannot influence so much, which is, as I said, our infrastructure.
Very interesting topic. And now I'm already thinking, I mean, employing more sustainable materials doesn't sound so complicated. If you build something new, if you have the right budget, you can do it. But I'm really concerned, like, how do you retrofit existing infrastructures now? Because they're not going to just tear down a hotel and then say, let's build a new eco hotel, which would be even worse from an ecological point of view. So what would be like smart ways to retrofit existing maybe hotels to be more sustainable? Where do you start?
Yeah, so retrofitting is very important, or refurbishing. I mean, you're going to be looking at secondhand, upcycling, and being innovative. So if you think about the building itself, if you think, I've seen those buildings, and I can provide a few examples later, but if you think about bedroom, corridors, front of the house, back of the house, you can nowadays having pretty cool design with exposed surfaces. So reducing the amount of energy and carbon that goes into finishes. So ceiling finishes, plasterboard, plaster, paint, work with natural self-finishing. If you have wooden floor, if you have stones, if you have metal, if you have clay, those can be implemented very well into a property without having to plaster everything and without having paint on it. And so it's really rethinking a little bit. And I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer, but I observe a lot, and I talk to those people regularly. And so it's really just rethinking about how do we deal with those materials. When it comes down to furniture, here it becomes tricky, because you're looking at, should you be betting on the longer lifespan of your furniture, higher quality, which may mean a higher upfront embodied carbon into this, but maybe preferable because you would reduce the replacement cycle, right? If I'm thinking of furniture, like heavy furniture that dates 300 years, that's been sitting in those buildings, generally like palaces and so on. So this furniture has got zero cycle of replacement. It's been constructed and it sits there and it's being used. So, right, specifying longevity would then become very important if you want to close the loop here on circularity, especially. So to say, you know, do I have furniture that I need to change every 3 years? Hence linear production, you know, waste production, etc. Or do you bet on longevity and so on? And this is really where it becomes super interesting. And I think, you know, it demands creativity. I think it demands creativity from both the hoteliers, from the brand standards, from the designers. And, you know, of course, we're working with our hands tied. But I've asked one famous architect on this planet, and I said, how hard is it for you when we give you a property and we say, there is a lot of boundaries that you have to work with. You cannot express it. And he says, these are the best project because this forces us to find our creativity, having our hands tied. And I like that because this is basically what it is. It's not, you know, we have only one planet and it's not a free for all. Like it's not, I do whatever I want, who cares about the cost and the external costs. And so it's working with your hands tied. It demands more creativity for sure.
Very interesting, the metaphor of the hands tied, because even especially comes so true with the, like you said, just in the tourism industry. First, for the tourist itself, or himself or herself, they don't have any impact on this infrastructural influence. No, they can't change how the hotel is built, and they can only have somehow on the operational part. But even the hotels, like you said, they, even if they want to maybe recreate now their business in a circular way or in a sustainable way, they're also depending on, are there the right materials there? Do I have the right providers? All these kind of facts factor in. So even the hotel could say, hey, it's not my responsibility and somebody else's. Not so. It really turns out it's a interlinked responsibility, really. No?
That's right. That's right. And this is why we say that partnership along the value chain is so important. So up your supply chain all the way to your distribution. Partnership is so important if we want to move the needle on sustainability. We've said that for years now. So doing work just in your bubble by yourself is not going to push that needle to greater sustainability. That really needs to be everybody. The thing is, what makes me a little bit hopeful on that particular aspect in terms of material, so both in terms of refurbishment, in terms of furniture, fixtures, equipment, but also construction material, is the amount of data we have to, and the granularity of that data on the impacts along that production. So from the sourcing of those material all the way to the manufacturing, and from the manufacturing all the way to the shipping to my hotel. So the amount of carbon that's being emitted along this way, the amount of water that's being used, some of the social impacts. It's still work in progress, but we've actually made progress on being able to quantify it. And this is extremely important because ultimately you're right to say when you're a hotelier, I mean, we are experts on welcoming customers, making them feel good and providing the right services. We may not be the experts on everything else, and nor do we have to. But we need to be able to make the right decisions, right? If we're talking about refurbishment, we need to be able to make the right, and making the right decisions mean we need that data. We need some granularity on making that. And that is now more and more available, which wasn't in the past. So this is in a way, this is why I'm sort of halfway hopeful. in terms of making the right decision when it comes to design, for example, and refurbishment cycle. Whereas you said it correctly that, in many ways, I mean, customers have got expectations and demands in terms of, they like to have a nice property, a looking good property, etc. But, many customers may not have quite the insights on what that means to provide this. And this is where the decision makers, which are either the owners or the owners following the brand standards or the ones setting the brand standards, have got such a responsibility to ensure that those decisions are made properly.
Very interesting points you mentioned, and I would like to go back to the technology aspect that you just mentioned, the data. And then all of a sudden I already think of smart measuring. No, let's say Hospitality 4.0, if you want to say so, with smart measuring, sensors, tracking, carbon tracking, waste tracking. I see a lot of technology solutions. So you think that technology, if I want to ask provocatively, will save us, or do we also have to really change other things and can't just say, okay, the technology is going to solve it for us?
Yeah, I mean, when we have trouble on this planet, we often refer back to man-made technology to save the day, really. I think it's got its limitation, to be honest. It's very important that we use efficiency gains that we can get from technology, but and this is more of a personal viewpoint. I think it needs a great deal of behavioral change as well. And then, so I can say a few words about that if you want to, and then we have nature-based issues, nature-based solutions. We can use what nature does to actually help us to mitigate our impact. So there's really three parts to it. I used to say there's only two parts: there's man-made technology and behavior, but in fact, nature can be a great supporter in having efficiency. So yeah, technology is great, but technology always has a delay, isn't it? I mean, if I take a hotel, for example, and I say, and especially these days where so many hotels are having crunch time with energy costs, you know, and so they're seeking energy efficiency. Well, the fastest gain to energy efficiency is to have your staff and your guests involved in your energy efficiency gain. Sorry. So, you know, computer stuff off after the shift, lights off in the meeting rooms, in the back office. I mean, all the behavioral change, make sure that boom, it's done. So that's the fastest gain you're going to get. If you want to have technology to support this, you can say, well, let's install, you know, sensors, motion sensors, and it's good. Motion sensors are good. But of course, you have to produce those motion sensors. You have to install them. There is a line of impact along the way. And of course, you're going to install those motion sensors and it's going to help you. But of course, the first round of help is only recouping the amount of energy and emissions that went into producing those motion sensors. I mean, it's the same as photovoltaic panels, very important. But, you know, there is something called energy payback time for photovoltaic panel, which basically says, well, how much energy went into building those in the first place? You put them up on your roof. The first couple years, if you're in the Northern Europe, that you produce energy from the photovoltaic panels is basically recouping the amount of energy that went into building them. So there is, I think technology is very important, but there's always a gap. There's always a delay. Behavioral change is pretty much instant, right? And so that's where the connection of the two is so important. If you want fastest gain, get the staff on board. And this is something that we can talk about later, but I think this is it. I think whether you run a restaurant, a hotel, you're at the destination, you're a tour operator, it's about owning those topics, really. And you say, you know, I own the topic sustainability. It's not something that somebody tells me to do. It's not because I have regulations, even though there are more regulations. It's not because the customer, it's I own it. And I own it and I do it better. And if you own that topic, then you take actions. Behavioral actions such as energy efficiency, I think, would be fast. And then there's the part on nature. So, you know, technology is important, but then we have nature. And this is pretty amazing because there's actually more and more research and data on what nature can do to even for building. So in urban environment, in terms of efficiency gain from green roof to green facade, having some of that blue-green infrastructure for water capture and so on. It's amazing because it's about air quality. It's about reduction of heating or cooling necessities. There is so much data there. So using that, right, improving sort of biodiversity within your environment, but using that to be able to mitigate your impact, fantastic.
But I'm glad you mentioned the nature-based solutions. I also see it seems to be a very trendy topic at the moment, also pushed from the political agenda. And me particularly as a permaculture designer, I'm so happy to see that now at the forefront. Before, all these nature-based solutions, permaculture designs were looked at a bit like, okay, that's hippie stuff, to be honest. Yeah, when I started permaculture over 10 years ago, nobody would, in the economic field, nobody would take me serious. No, and now I'm so glad that with circular economy and nature-based solutions, we have our playing field. And I think it's time that the design skills from, for example, permaculture comes together with, like you said, technology and hospitality experts, and really bring good designs together. No, because you would agree that in the end, many things start from the design in the beginning. How do you design? The whole experience basically is then how we create impact or don't create impact.
Yeah, exactly. And there's another research that we've published, actually, is going to come. I think maybe it's out already. We've looked at sort of we partially look at biophilic design in hotel spaces. So looking at, you know, our innate attraction to natural elements, let's put it this way, as a shortcut. And we've looked at biophilic design, not from the guest point of view. So there's a lot of hotels that actually use biophilic design features to promote a certain experience to guests. So the use of greenery within your hotels or pictures depicting natural environment, things like that, which, you know, makes people feel good, etc. But we actually looked at the stuff in the back of the house to see how about the employee side. And of course, this is it. I mean, it's because you mentioned, I'm coming to design because you're mentioning it's a conscious decision on how to do things, and ultimately, yes, that's what it is. It is about making those decisions. We have a lot of data on nature-based solutions, we have a lot of data on what can be done, but ultimately this data is only as good as it drives some kind of decision. And this is what we're seeing here, particularly when it comes down to, you know, improving our buildings, improving the experiences. It comes down to managers and decision makers to say, that's what we do, right? And I said that, so owning the topic again, right?
It also goes in line with another thing that I would like to talk about is the stakeholder involvement, because like you said, the one main stakeholder are the employees. Then you have the other stakeholder, the customers. But there's so many more stakeholders, especially involved in the tourism experience. And when we talk about circularity and how to make things more circular, it turns out more and more that you alone can't do it. You always have to find, like you said, creative ways with your stakeholders together that all are involved in the creation of value. So what are your experience in how well that could work, the stakeholder involvement, and do you know some best practice?
Yeah, so we have, well, yes, there is, we see this. I mean, this is all work in progress, but we see this with our distributors. I mean, if you're a hotel, if you're a hotel and you're working with online travel agents, OTAs, and you're, you know, you've been very active on the sustainability front, you know that, you know, there's this part of the customers that are more interested. We have surveys showing that. And so you would want to perhaps use this as a promoting tool, but then the OTAs may not be representing this well. But now this is changing. I mean, I think the OTAs have much more of an open ear to be able to make sure that attention is turned to hotels that are actually proactively dealing with sustainability issues. So this is an example of work in progress, but positively work in progress to say, let's build that really. So it's not only me distributing your rooms with your room rates, but it's also me making sure that the information about what you do is transported to the customers, so the customers have access to whatever you're doing at your property. So that's going to be very important. So we see that happening. And I think, so that's looking downwards towards the distribution and looking upwards towards the supply. Well, I mean, we're having that, as I said, like furniture, fixtures and equipment. So FF&E production, we have now a platform that allows us to have a better insights in terms of the impacts of choices of furniture, for example. So that's up the stream as well. So it's a different stakeholder. And I think that's very important. And of course, you could say, well, how about nature itself, like as a stakeholder, someone that doesn't have a voice, right? I mean, the insects and the plants and so on. But here too, you know, we see things happening, and research helps always. This is why academic work is actually super important, but it's the translation of academic work for the industry, which is even more important. But I've read a research not too long ago that was conducted in the UK exactly about this. They were saying that the bulk of pollinator insects, the food for those guys is nectar and pollen. And they found that in the UK, a large part of that nectar comes from residential urban gardens. So, you know, your hotel with the balconies, with the flowers, with the rooftop, with the surrounding of it, and all these other residential, that's where there is a diversity, a floral diversity that actually helps those insects to thrive. And so here's another stakeholder, if you will. Can we support that stakeholder? Yeah, we can. In fact, we can actively do something. There is nothing worse than having a bare property with nothing, like just having brick and stone that captures the heat and does nothing else. That really does nothing for your community. It does nothing from the city, except releasing heat in the summer, which is already hot.
And I think this
so,
is why didn't they even suspend those in Germany? Wasn't there like a regulation that it's not allowed to have these stone gardens anymore?
That's right. Yeah. Many. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in fact, there are many communities now and cities that are actively supporting the regreening of either, you know, a front facade of yours, supporting by half the cost of the green roofing, or even removing some of those stones in front to have green, because that's I mean, it's the whole thing about heat, the urban island, heat island in the summer, which is extremely problematic. So all the heat that gets trapped in it, but it's also for water cycle. We know that. I mean, we get these heavier rain, more intense, and by sealing the ground, we have those crazy waterways that are, you know, it goes into the storm sewers and creates massive issues around hotels as well. So we want to be able to have, again, a cycle. And this is also circularity, is to, you know, cities have been created in linear thinking, and by rebringing nature in a city, it's about closing that loop. It's about creating that circularity that nature does so well.
Very interesting. I could keep talking and talking, but we have to also make it close. Maybe for our listeners and watchers, easy ways to be, or for a hotel owner, for example, if you have a tourism business, easy ways to say this is where I should start being more sustainable, like easy win?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much easy win. I've said that already because so many hoteliers are actually very worried about the energy costs right now. I said, do a 3 a.m. like do a night walk. We call this a night walk, like a 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Go into your property and go see what's happening at your property in the middle of the night. You will be surprised to see the amount of lights on, the amount of heating spaces where there's nobody. Is basically being active, and so that's an easy win, of course, right? If we're looking for easy win, but behind that, it's, as I said, it's to own the topic, it's to make it yours. Basically, nothing can happen if you don't make it yours. So I would say make sustainability initiative yours. Get active. In fact, be an activist at your workplace, be an activist at home, every day, at home, on transit, at work, putting the pressure to do actions, because this is ultimately, I mean, we're professors, so we're men of words, if you will, but what we need really is those words to be into actions. And so if we're serious about keeping this home safe for us, for our kids and community and the environment, we have to own those topics, make it a priority. And you know what? At the end, you'll find this enriching. There is nothing better in the summer than having a garden full of insects and flowers, and you just can stay in front of it and just be in awe. So make that topic yours and just go with it.
Thank you so much. I can just say, practice what you preach now, and actions speak louder than words.
Yep.
Thank you so much, though, for your words. Very powerful and very insightful. Willy, hope to see you again. Have a nice day and keep creating positive impact. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Bye. See you.
Bye.